Say, I don't like submitting. I want to be a free man. Why is it that I have to submit to something I can't see, something I can't hear, something I can't feel? What's the point of that? But then I'd like to ask that question to someone who proposes such a thing. I say, you want to be a free man, right? You submit to no one, you submit to nothing. So whenever you're on an airplane, do you tell the pilot to step aside, I want to fly myself, wherever I want to go? You'll say, no, I don't know how to fly a plane. But you're submitting to the pilot, aren't you? You're putting your faith in that pilot, that he's going to take you from point A to point B. But for those of you who are having trouble with understanding what I'm talking about, let's talk about something else. In math class, when you're sitting in math class, subject everyone loves, I'm sure, and the teacher is teaching, do you get up and then say, hey, I want to teach this class? Do you do that? No, I'm not a math teacher. But you're submitting to the teacher. The teacher is telling you to stay put, be quiet. If you have a question, you have to raise your hand. So if we notice, it's in our human nature to submit to a higher authority. Otherwise, we wouldn't get anywhere. So whenever we say, I submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when I say I submit to a higher being, I submit to the divine, you're going above everything else. And it's okay, it's completely okay to say I submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These rules come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You didn't create yourself. Imagine if I gave birth to myself. Actually, don't imagine that, that's pretty messy. You didn't create yourself. The universe didn't create itself. It had a creator. Therefore, you have to follow the guidelines set forth by the creator. And I'll use another analogy to top that off. When you're kids, you don't choose to go to school. Imagine a 5-year-old picking up a book and going, hey, mommy, I'm ready for kindergarten. You don't see that happening. You have to either bribe the kid, you have to beat him, God forbid. You have to do something to take him to school. He doesn't want to go, it's boring. He's not wise enough to do that. That's why wisdom dictates that the wise are supposed to make the decisions. Let's recite a loud salawat. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So with that being said, a lot of times people say, so what's the point of researching? Just like Brother Muhammad Jihad mentioned before, why should I look into the ahkam? I'm a Muslim, I have to submit anyway, so what's the point? And Allah answered this very directly in Surah Al-Araf, verse 184, where He says, أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا? Do they not reflect? مَا بِصَاحِبِهِمْ مِنْ جِنَّةٍ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا نَذِيرٌ مُبِينٌ. There is no madness in their companion. And in companion, it means Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So Prophet Muhammad is just a plain warner. And it says in the end of the he is nothing but a plain warner. He's not a madman. He didn't come forth with a bunch of rules. He didn't tell you randomly to fast. So that's why in the beginning of the ayah it says, أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا? Do they not reflect? Do they not think about this religion was not brought forth by a man. This religion was a guideline set forth for you to go through life in the best way. And we talked about previously that Islam is a religion, by definition, it means peace. But in what sense? Peace for the body, peace for the mind, and peace for the soul. And tonight we're going to be talking about fasting. Why is it that Muslims fast? A lot of times we ask why we're so practical. And fasting in the holy month of Ramadan is what Muslims are known for. In chapter 2, verse 183, Allah says, O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may become pious and guard yourselves. So who's it referring to when it says it was prescribed for you as it was for the people before you? It's referring to the religions that came before Islam. So let's take a brief look into religions that were there before Islam, such as Hinduism. On holy occasions, many Hindus, and I'm not claiming to have extensive knowledge of Hinduism, this is just very brief research I did for this presentation. In Hinduism, they fast on many holy occasions. Also, on the 11th of every month, they fast. On the 11th of every month, they fast. And the wife apparently can fast for their God to prolong their husband's life. Yeah, I said that right? Yeah, so the wives can fast for their husband to have a prolonged life. Let's look at Christianity. We find there's many similarities between Islam and Christianity. In the book of Exodus, we find that Moses fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Again, in the book of Isaiah, it says that don't fast for the people around you. Fasting is a worship between you and God. And in the book of Matthew, chapter 4, verse 1, it says Jesus fasted for many days in order to have strength to fight off Satan. So again, we're saying fasting is prevalent in Christianity. But it doesn't stop there. We have fasting even in Judaism. There's a holiday by the name of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the day when Moses was able to free the children of Israel from Pharaoh. So they fast on that day to celebrate. And then they have another thing called Tisha B'Av, which is the day that the temple of Solomon, the prophet Suleiman, his temple was destroyed. And they fast to commemorate that. So what am I trying to say? Why am I telling you about all these other religions? And that's to say, Islam didn't come forth 1400 years ago to reject any religion. Islam came forth to confirm and renew. You know, many people say Islam was the hybrid of all religions. It came forth, it's the newest one out of Christianity and Judaism. So it came forth, they took all the goods and it made its own religion. I say, correction, Islam wasn't created 1400 years ago. Islam was the original. It was completed 1400 years ago. So what did Islam do? It came forth and it took the gray and it separated it into black and white. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now we're talking about fasting, and we can look at it from many aspects. But right now we're going to look at the physiological aspects. What are the physical health benefits of me fasting? And by the way, I can go on hours upon hours telling you how good fasting is for your body. But I'd just like to briefly mention a few points that I found really, really interesting. Whenever we fast, there's a protein in our brain that's released called brain-derived neurotrophic factors. Try saying that 5 times. Or we can call it BDNF. BDNF. This protein, apparently it interacts with the parts of a brain that regulate memory, learning, and higher cognitive function, which is uniquely exclusive to human beings. No other animals have these parts of the brain. So whenever we fast, these proteins begin to interact with these parts of the brain. And what do? They lengthen the life of the brain cells, otherwise known as neurons, and they stimulate the growth of new neurons, which is called neurogenesis. Furthermore, when it comes to fasting, studies have shown that fasting in fact lowers chances of stroke, reduces chances of receiving brain trauma, protection against Alzheimer's disease, and even slows down the progression of Huntington's disease. And for those of you who don't know what Huntington's and Alzheimer's is, it's whenever parts of the brain begin to degrade. Your brain cells begin to degrade, and either you begin to lose cognitive function or you begin to lose your memories. So this, in fact, slows down the process. How many of you guys knew that? Not many, huh? Ali, you know that? MashaAllah. Okay. Also, a lot of times people come forth and say, what if I have some disease or something? Does fasting make it worse? In fact, in 1994, there was the International Congress of Health and Ramadan held in Casablanca. It entered 50 extensive studies where they showed fasting not only does it improve your health, but since everyone's different, it showed no signs of worsening anyone's health. But then you ask the question, what about the diabetics? What about the cancer? In fact, it improves cancer, people who are suffering from cancer. But what about all these people? And it's so simple. If you're ill and you can't fast, Allah says in the Quran, God wishes for you convenience, not hardship, so that you may fulfill your obligations and glorify God for guiding you and express your appreciation. So if you're ill, you can basically make up for those days that you miss your fasts. But why does Allah prescribe it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He puts such a harsh punishment on fasting. If we willfully break a fast, you guys know the punishment is 60 consecutive days of fasting. Why is that? Why is it that we have to pay such a high zakat? Why is it that we have to free a slave if there's one available? Because Allah is your creator. And who better to know you than your creator? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Like some people say, fasting is so good for my health. Why can't I always fast? Unfortunately, it's been shown that if people who have prolonged fasting experiences and caloric restrictions are really grumpy. And really, really grumpy. You don't want to hang out with those people. But it's incredible that Allah has prescribed this 1 month for fasting. And by the way, I just want to bring up a theory. My professor brought it up just this year. It's called the 50 genes hypothesis. It's where a professor by the name of James Neal in the University of Michigan came forth with this theory, where he says diabetes and obesity is on such a high rise. And he's noticed that it should have been weeded out by evolution a long time ago. Why is it that the dominant gene for diabetes is so prevalent? Isn't diabetes supposed to be isn't evolution supposed to be the survival of the fittest? Why is it that it stayed so long? Why didn't natural selection weed it out? And then he proposed this theory that back then we used to be cavemen and we used to be hunters. So every now and then we'd hunt down a water buffalo and we'd have an era of merriment and we'd feast on it. But then we'd have no more food and we'd have to undergo a period of starvation. So whenever we undergo this period of starvation, our body automatically adapts to it. So we have to store fat during this time when there is food. And whenever there's a period of starvation, I have to use the stored fat. So this Dr. James Neal proposed this idea that this was brought.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
He proposed this idea that it's been carried on throughout time. And this is the way our bodies have been naturally programmed. So after we eat, our body automatically goes into this starvation where we're supposed to undergo a time of starvation. However, that doesn't happen anymore. Unfortunately, we have something called a refrigerator, which we can have access to any time we want and eat and eat and eat. So whenever our body goes into that famine mode, we're still eating. So what he proposes, in order to reduce obesity, in order to reduce type 2 diabetes, we should undergo a period of starvation every now and then. So I tell you, which religion prescribes fasting for 1 month, where it's so obligatory, and for you to miss out on that is a very big punishment. That's incredible. I didn't know that. The minute he said that, the first thing I was thinking about is Ramadan. Wow. Allah knows us so well that He knows that we're going to cut corners if He doesn't put this strictness on it. He knows that we're going to cut corners. So therefore Allah says, you have to fast. I want you to fast. You need to fast. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Also fasting brings about another thing in our minds that a lot of times we forget. And that's something I like to call appreciation through deprivation. Many a times we don't know the worth of something until it's gone. Our parents, we don't know what they're worth until they finally leave this world. So whenever we're fasting, we're deprived of so many things. We can't have water whenever we want. We can't have food whenever we want. And then the funny thing is, in America, people are dying of too much food. Yet in Africa, people are dying of too little food. So whenever we're fasting, and we can't have access to that, to your favorite meal whenever you want it, you begin to think back, and you know what? This is what people are going through all around the world. I have all of this, yet I don't even think Allah before I eat. I don't even think Allah after I eat. Look at what I'm living. Look at this life. You know what I mean? This is what I mean by appreciation through deprivation. And this comes into the soul aspect of Islam, where, in fact, sallallahu So now we're talking about the soul. How does fasting help our souls? And this is this is defined very well by Imam Zain al-Abidin salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Where he writes in Risalat al-Uqub, he writes, the right of fasting is that you know that it is a veil that God has set up over your tongue, over your ears, over your eyes, your stomach, and your private parts. You should shield, and to shield you from the fire. If you abandon fast, you will have torn God's veil away from yourself. We say Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan merciful. Ramadan, this month is such a mercy that for us to not want to fast, it's like tearing away God's veil from us. Saying, I don't want it. Take your blessing and take it. I don't want this. This is how it is. And if we think back, if we really look at all the crimes that have happened, it's due to a lack of self-control. Think about it. We have rape victims. We have people who have killed people, other people. In fact, I remember my sister was telling me where a dentist in Michigan found out that her husband was cheating on him. Her husband was cheating on her. So he sedated her own husband and pulled out all his teeth when he was asleep. Can you imagine that? This is through anger, but it's funny, huh? It's not funny for the guy. But it happens. And whenever we talk about Ramadan, we're talking about our emotions being intact. We're talking about being kind to each other for the sake of Allah. And by the way, whenever atheists ask you, what makes you so special? Well, I eat the same thing you do. I sleep the same way you do. What makes you so special? What do you have that I don't have? It's a very simple answer. It's that your life revolves around yourself. Every action you do is for yourself. Whereas my life revolves around a greater being. It revolves around a God.